The King of the Battlefield Chapter 31. Chapter 31, Free for All, 3. TL by Mayanai. Edited by Mayanai and Yoni. Sponsored by Anonymous. Was it because he turned into a blazing spear soldier? However, the bright light was floating above other undead as well. It's the effect of the skill. He thought he was seeing the lights because of the soul exploitation skill. Myung immediately turned his status viewer and read his newly acquired skill. Skill name, Soul Exploitation, F. Description: absorb undead with an art score above 70 to increase your stats. There is a very low possibility of obtaining one of the skills the undead possessed. The efficiency varies depending on the art score, skill rank and the material of the undead. Myung's eyebrows twitched slightly. Hey! He wasn't this surprised when he created the blazing spear soldier. Fire Dragon Wu could be classified as a top-ranked material, but due to the property of the undead, he wouldn't get stronger. Unless it was strengthened by the necromancer personally using his magic or through equipment or fusion. Although it couldn't be said that all undead couldn't develop, it was very rare. So eventually there would be a time when the undead would be discarded, and when that time came, Myung could use this skill. I could even gain their skill. Myung concentrated on the last part of the description. Even though the possibility was low, there was a chance to obtain one of the skills the undead possessed. That meant, if he was to create someone with a really good skill, he could cast soul exploitation to obtain that skill. Although that was only when that low possibility worked to his favor. However, once he cast the spell, the undead would become useless. This skill seemed to be best used when the undead was about to be discarded. The skeleton of fire and ice. Myung raised his head. The half-collapsed skeleton of fire and ice had its head completely lowered next to him. But, there definitely was a bright light hovering above it. It meant it was possible to use soul exploitation. The light started to slowly dim, and it looked like after a period of time, he could no longer use it. Soul exploitation. Myung approached the skeleton and cast the skill. Soon a blue light appeared out of Myung's hand and stole the light above the skeleton's head. It is a work of art with an art score of 71. After examining the material and the skill rank, you have exploited 4% of its stats. The skeleton of fire and ice has a total of 187 stats. 7 of the stats will be randomly distributed to your stats. Strength +1, Agility +2, Intelligence +1, Fighting Aura +1, Magic Resistance +2. Sadly, he wasn't able to obtain a skill. Well, it would have been weird if he was easily able to obtain a skill when it said the possibility was low. The fact that the skill used the total amount of stats as the standard drew his attention. There were many cases where the undead made with top-quality materials would develop multiple stats. If Myung was to use this skill on those undead, he would be able to gain more stats with the same effect. My stamina is recovered. Another thing. He could feel his body getting stronger through his skin. However, there was another effect. The wounds inflicted during the fight with Fire Dragon Wu healed at a visible rate. Looks like the soul exploitation skill can even heal my wounds. Myung slowly nodded his head. The skill he obtained after ranking the Art of Death skill to C rank, it could be incredibly useful depending on how he used it. He was positive that his skills were 1 or 2 levels above a normal necromancer at the very least. As his movements became more natural, Myung turned his status viewer to see his increased stats. Achievement Effect Grimoire's Anguish, A, +3 to all abilities. Class Effect Death Lord, Lord Class, Ruler of Death. Stats. Strength 67, 41 + 26, Agility 61, 43 + 18. Stamina 67, 39 + 28, Intelligence 36, 18 + 18. Wisdom 35, 17 + 18, Fighting Aura 42, 24 + 18. Magic Resistance 30, 12 + 18. Special note, Fighting Aura has been awakened. Equipped and invoked equipment, Anguish, Strength +5, Herculean Strength Leather Armor, Strength +3, Lunatic Sovereign Set, all stats +15, Stamina +10. My basic stats have increased. Magic resistance as well. Normally, stats increased by skills or equipment were considered support stats. Curse-type skills would usually reduce the support stats by a percentage, and if people went into high-ranked anti-magic fields, they would not receive an increase of stats from skills. However, there was no problem if his basic stats increased. On top of that, magic resistance was a stat he wasn't even able to increase by 1 until now. Although he did develop the stat, methods to increase it were almost non-existent. Usually, it could only be raised with the help of equipment or an achievement, but now there was a way to increase it without difficulty. The strong who placed at the top would normally pay a lot of attention to magic resistance. Due to the characteristic of the underworld, they didn't know who would use what skill to threaten them. No matter how strong you were, if you were careless, you would die. It was because of this, Myung was able to successfully complete his assassination against someone with a large difference in stats. While he rubbed his chin, thinking about something momentarily, the blazing spear soldier regained his original appearance. Master. Myung glanced towards the blazing spear soldier. You can talk. Please give me orders. Was it because he was only half dead? Or was it because he had more intelligence and wisdom than his other undead? Myung couldn't help but ask. Do you have any memories of when you were alive? I only remember a little. Myung crossed his arms. His intelligence was enough, but his memories weren't completely intact. If he still retained his memories, it would have been a big help in dealing with the other 4 judges, but the problem was his memories were too ambiguous. If they found out that he was an undead, Myung would lose his blazing spear soldier and arouse their attention. I can use him. However, it wasn't like all paths were blocked. Myung started to design a small plan. A story that could be used even outside the box of trials. A method that could keep suspicions at a minimum while gaining all the profit. You will act like Fire Dragon Wu from now on. Do you at least remember his way of speech? I remember. I will do as you command. Although he did pause his words, it was enough. Myung put everything in order and moved out without any hesitation. Taewon had to choose. To be satisfied or go out. As a leader, he had tremendous responsibilities. His decision could decide whether more than 10 people lived or died. Was staying here really safe? Rocky formations. It was an ideal place to hide. However, they had no way of knowing when there will only be 300 remaining. And he didn't feel like hiding either. If they used the death of others as a stepping stone for survival, it was certain that they would continue to use it. The first time was hard, from the second, it was easy. I can't assume everyone besides the judges are on the same side. Myung had told them that there would be some who would submit to their power. And if they had endured a month in a temple like them, there was no way of knowing for sure they were nice people. He said if we want to win, we have to combine our strength. Myung would never say anything that was impossible. If Myung mentioned winning, it meant that the possibility of winning wasn't zero. The result would change depending on their actions. That was what Taewon thought. I am gathering those that are willing to fight against the judges. It is dangerous, so I won't force you. I hope that those who are willing will follow me. Taewon would always respectfully state his opinion. He believed that he couldn't force anyone to follow when it would lead to a deadly situation. Of course, everyone could only try to read what was on each other's minds. They would be safe if they stayed hidden, so would there really be people who would risk their lives? I'll go with you. It's not like we're a 100% safe staying here either, right? If that's the case, it's better to make a last-ditch effort. Kong Baeksu. He was the man who Taewon had been through the Star of David and 2 boss battles with. Although he was a bit sleazy, he was someone he could trust. Kim Tae-won and Kong Baeksu were the real big shots of the temple. If those two both left at once, there would be too big of a gap. As Baeksu acted, the atmosphere slowly started to change. Finally, 7 people including B. Suzy gathered and Tae-won didn't scold the rest. I can't force their decision. Let's try to change the progression of the battle with these 7 people. Tae-won left the rocky formations with a heavy heart. Although they started with vigor, it wasn't easy to find people. Even when they did, people didn't want to follow Tae-won. Only 7 people. There wasn't anyone who would believe in a group with a child and wounded people. They just couldn't understand. The force displayed by the judges were beyond their imaginations. At that time, it did look like they were going to gather their forces to attack, but once they felt the difference between them, they all lowered their tails. In reality, the people's reactions were all the same. Why would I take that risk? When I could hide and wait for it to drop to 300 people. Can't I just leave then? How can I believe you enough to follow you? How are you going to do something with 7 people when we couldn't do anything with 1,000? It'd be a relief we all died a dog's death. They were right. Didn't Tae-won just barely resist that temptation? Cowardly bastards. Baeksu ground his teeth. It's because I'm not good enough. However, the first thing Tae-won felt was remorse. It was because he wasn't able to get people to trust him. Maybe if he had the same strength as Myeong, it might have gone differently. He would have been able to lead the crowd with his overwhelming charisma. Tae-won still didn't give up. If he could just increase the numbers, it would also increase their strength. He wholeheartedly believed that there was someone out there with the same thoughts as him. However, the hunting dogs were a problem. Those who submitted to power had spotted the group of 7 and started their attack. Shit! Baeksu raised his dagger. The number of hunting dogs was well above 20. Just why are you doing this, you damn bastards? Baeksu suddenly shouted. The situation really wasn't great. A bloodbath. It was to the point where Tae-won was just barely able to block the front. However, the enemies were frantic. You guys need to die for us to live. I don't want to die. They acted like if they didn't kill they would be the ones to die. There was no way they could start a conversation in a situation like this. So the only way for them to live was to kill their enemies. And, the side to die had been decided. Is this the end? Tae-won felt the sky turn yellow. It might have been best just to hide in between the rocks. And it looked like people were going to die because of his reckless bravado. I have to let at least a person escape. He felt responsible. Tae-won was willing to die. He pushed the hunting dogs away with his shield of eradication to force a path. However, no matter how many dogs he pushed away, more would come and take their place. Please, please. Tae-won gritted his teeth. Even when he received a wound or a deep slash, he wasn't fazed. Strength poured in. The shape of the shield changed. But, it was inadequate. If he didn't kill everyone, he would not be able to leave this place. It didn't matter if he was willing to die or if he obtained a unique class, the current Tae-won was unable to handle the strength of the masses. The shadow of despair covered everyone's face. At that moment, they instinctively realized that there was no way out and that their deaths were approaching. Sweesh! Thud! A red spear flew down from afar. The hunting dog's head, which was hit by the spear, exploded like a firework. And as if it was planned, everyone's movements stopped. At the same time, Tae-won mumbled after looking to the direction the spear flew from. Fire Dragon Wu? Hyung Neem. The judge, Fire Dragon Wu. He was calming, walking towards them. What was more surprising was that the man next to Wu was Myeong. And more than 100 people were trailing behind them. Chapter 32, Free for All, 4. The hunting dogs could only panic. Why would a judge? The judges were the ones who made them into hunting dogs. They were the ones who forcefully attached the lightning runes and ordered them to hunt, so why was a judge attacking them? But, Wu was only expressionless. When he stretched out his hand, the blazing spear returned to him. Afterwards, without any mercy, he started to hunt. Why on earth? Gaeok. Wu could not be stopped with only 20 hunting dogs. As soon as the 100 people behind him joined up with them, the situation was quickly resolved. Tiwan just gawked at the scene. His head wasn't able to process the situation fast enough. He could only recover his senses after Muyong approached him. Hyung Neem. How did this happen? Why did you leave the rocky area? Tiwan gulped his saliva as Muyong asked instead of replying. Hub. He felt choked. He thought he was being scolded by being asked what he had accomplished while Muyong had finished his preparations. Truthfully, Tiwan didn't do anything besides driving his comrades into danger. Nothing. There was a common saying that it is better to remain silent than risk being thought as a fool. Tiwan was the latter. Because he was weak. He just acted with reckless bravado. I didn't want to just hide. I guess it's in your nature. Muyong chuckled as he turned around. Muyong believed he needed to slightly adjust his thoughts about Tiwan. If there are people who change, there should be others who don't. The people who were praised as true heroes like the Dragon Lord, all were strong-spirited in nature. What is a hero? People who cannot let injustice pass by even if they knew that the situation was hopeless. Therefore, most lived a short life. But if they were to survive, they would leave a mark in this world. He became stronger. And Tiwan became stronger. With a glance, Muyong could tell that Tiwan had changed. When he saw that the shape of his shield had changed, he realized that it probably had a secret option. He didn't seem like a fool who simply followed his will. Probably. When people talk about what qualities a hero possessed, they were probably referring to people like Tiwan. The problem was surviving, and that was solely Tiwan's responsibility. Muyong couldn't do anything in that area. It was probably only possible for him to push his back a little. They were worth being respected. Muyong thought of the heroes he had killed with his hands. At least, they weren't like the monsters that moved for their selfish motives whom Muyong loathed, they were upright in their beliefs. The problem was that they made up only a few people and most were hostile towards them. A lot of things could have been different if they didn't die by those monsters who used the forest of death to do their work. At least, it wouldn't have hopelessly collapsed like that. The reason why Muyong aimed for an absolute power that no one had ever achieved was because he felt it was meaningless to fight with them. He wanted to give off the impression that if they messed with him, everything would be destroyed and use that to stop them in advance. The underworld was a world where the winner gets all. If he stepped on them so that even the new sprouts couldn't shoot up, no one would attempt to crawl all over him. Therefore, it was true that he had positive feelings towards Tiwan, who had the qualities of a true hero. At first, he was negative towards him, but after seeing how his actions, his perspective had changed. Muyong spoke quietly. Follow me. Desperately learn and master with your eyes and movements. After you become strong, you won't need to hide any longer. Muyong only had one goal. Using Fire Dragon Wu to rally up people and have a real free-for-all fight. The 4 judges could not be handled by just Wu and Muyong. However, things would change if hundreds of people were gathered. The judges would falter thinking that Wu betrayed them and he was going to squeeze in through that gap. Also, Muyong knew who the first person to let their guard down would be. Code. One of the judges, second daughter of the Lawless clan. She was engaged with Wu. For the Fire Dragon clan, the engagement was supposed to be the footsteps towards becoming part of the 5 great clans. And, to progress their relationship, the two were placed in the same trial. However, Wu had already become an undead. Muyong could hide in the shadows and attain the reward when Wu kills Code by exploiting the flaws of the box of trials. It was highly likely that they were trying to make their rising stars more competitive and stronger. They would have had to include terms if a judge killed another. And it wouldn't have been a petty reward either. After all, the 5 great clans and the 9 guilds are all competitive with each other. It was obvious what kind of trial they have set for the box of trials. Was someone killed by Wu? There could be an uproar, but that was it. On the contrary, the Fire Dragon clan might be happy about it. As Wu would have demonstrated enough power for the Fire Dragon clan to be well known throughout the underworld. Of course, they couldn't just be happy about it. Wu will disappear. However, he couldn't just let Wu go after everything was complete. Even if he was half dead, he was still an undead. There will be some who would recognize him. And Weiyong's identity would be revealed. He needed to design a meticulous plan that would certainly work. Zabe. Zaeop. Then, a lightning storm raged from afar. Within the lightning storm, a figure flew towards them. And below, people who had lost their will followed one after another. It was the person who had placed lightning runes on people and turned them into hunting dogs. You traitor! You even dare to turn your back on me! Code had appeared. Code's appearance was faster than Weiyong had imagined. However, the other 3 judges hadn't appeared. They might not have wanted to get involved in a love quarrel. They were strengthened. Weiyong's gaze was focused on the hunting dogs Code had brought with her. As if they were drunk, their eyes seemed out of focus, and as if their muscles expanded, their bodies had become larger. About 50 people. While Weiyong led a number a bit over 150. Even though there was a definite difference in numbers, there was no way to guarantee a win. Gaga. Why are you acting like this all of a sudden? Are you crazy? Code's face turned red as she raged at him. As they were already engaged, they called each other differently. However, Wu's expression didn't change. So you're not going to speak? You want to hang around with these bugs instead of us, right? Okay. Then, I will kill you all. It's not like your Fire Dragon clan can do anything against my lawless clan. Attack. An undead could be ordered through his consciousness. Wu grabbed hold of his blazing spear and swung it around. Swoosh. He moved without the slightest hesitation. Zop. The spear brushed against Code's neck. He wanted to finish her off in one shot when her guard was down, but it only left a scratch. A layer of lightning around her acted as a shield. You tried to attack me? You dare attack me? Me. Splot. A wide shockwave of lightning spread out from Code's entire body. The ground shook and it was hard to even approach her. If you just looked at their stats, Code was a level higher than Wu. However, Wu became stronger as he became an undead. First, the fact that he no longer feared death was a very big factor. Use Rain of Fire. Wu, the blazing spear soldier, moved as he heard Weiyong's order. As he courageously stepped in the shockwave made of lightning, he produced his blazing spear and pierced it multiple times. Meanwhile, Weiyong never forgot to look around. Tiwan. You lead the rest of the people. Tiwan's eyes widened. You mean me? You are the 3rd strongest person here. You can have some confidence. 3rd. Tiwan nodded as if he thought it was quite the compliment. I understand. A fight had started, the hunting dogs against the humans. Remove the core of the electric shield. Meanwhile, Weiyong focused on ordering the blazing spear soldier. He wasn't used to these types of fights, but Weiyong was still able to think a few moves ahead. If he could recognize the opponent's movements ahead of time and ordered him accordingly, that was enough. Through the blazing spear soldier, Weiyong was able to move in a way his current body couldn't. The core of the electric shield. As he stopped the path that the lightning flowed through, the raging lightning calmed noticeably. You're just making a last frantic attempt. Gaga won't be able to win against me. You should know well yourself. Hanging around with a bunch of bugs, did you forget your position? Then I'll teach you again, properly. Code was also part of the inferiority complex Wu had. Wu always had his tail between his legs as Code was one of the geniuses of the lawless clan. However, would Wu know? That if they just looked at their strength, Wu was comparable to Code. That he was never able to pass over his own limits due to the surrounding pressure and his inferiority complex. As he was able to borrow Muyoung's eyes, he was not the same as he used to be. If he was stuck, he would force his way through. Now! The soldier slammed the ground as he quickly jumped up. The soldier moved as though it was one with Muyoung. As the two slowly blended, it was no different than Muyoung moving on his own body. I want to win. Muyoung could also hear the cry of Wu's soul. This was how Muyoung could understand how great of an inferiority complex he had against Code, the person who was supposed to become his closest. Muyoung could read the flow of the lightning. Since the lightning flowed in a single direction, it wasn't impossible to reach Code if they moved to the side. Code trembled as he slowly moved closer. How? He tossed the flowing lightning aside with his spear. The fire spread apart and neutralized the lightning. The flow of the fight had changed. Muyoung wasn't naive to give back the momentum he had attained. Wasn't Muyoung the type who would never let go after grabbing hold of a chance to win? Code raised her hand to create lightning and continuously tried to attack him, but they were unable to reach him. Lies. There is no way Gaga could destroy my lightning. Even that bias showed that she had already let her guard down. Letting one's guard down would result in a loss. Also, Code had never lost in her life. She was weak in these situations. Soon, the blazing spear soldier stood right in front of her as he passed through the lightning. An emotionless face. Because of it, she was more afraid. After seeing him like that, Code could only tense up. You aren't going to kill me, right? You wouldn't kill me. I will take back what I said before. The soldier raised his spear high in the air. Stop! There wasn't even a second of hesitation. The spear pierced through Code's neck. At the same time, a long message appeared on top of his status viewer. Chapter 33, Free for All, End. TL, Yoni. Edited, Yoni and Mayanai. Code's body was lying on the cold floor. However, this wasn't the end. Kaya. The people who were strengthened by the lightning runes started to go wild. After watching the scene, Muyoung just turned his head. T1 needs experience. T1 was still a rookie. But, he had the qualities to become a hero. Only through rough experiences would his potential fully bloom. In the very least, the so-called heroes Muyoung had seen weren't the type who needed help from others and had to overcome numerous trials on their own to raise the voices. And, it was the perfect situation for T1 to gain experience. If Muyoung was to engage now, T1 would lose this chance. Soulmate. Muyoung completely moved his attention to the reward he received. He turned his status viewer and looked carefully at the newly appeared sentence. Soulmate, B+, when you have a high assimilation with an undead, the undead stats will slightly increase. Soulmate. It seemed as though using Blazing Spear Soldier to kill Code made it possible. In reality, all of the Blazing Spear Soldier's stats were increased by 2. That wasn't all. Piece of the Earth Dragon's skin. Materials from dragons were very rare. A green piece of skin appeared on top of the soldier's hands. The amount was small as it could fit in 2 hands, but even if it appeared that way, it was still a high-grade material. It was particularly difficult to find a dragon's skin. It was because a dragon didn't leave any trace of their shed skin. And among the various skins, the Earth Dragon's skin had exceptional magic conductivity. There was less chance of a leakage in magic power when a material with high magic conductivity was used to make an equipment. Since there was also a high chance to amplify the magic, receiving the Earth Dragon's skin was better than most rewards. Muyoung pondered for a moment and placed the piece inside the infinity pouch. There was no need for it right now, but later in the future, there were a lot of ways this material could be useful. Headley's cow. It might be nice if I get the heart of the phoenix and use it together. Making an equipment with the heart of the phoenix and the earth dragon's skin? It would depend on the blacksmith's skills, but whatever he makes, it will at least be an A++ rank equipment. It was enjoyable just by thinking about it. For it to be higher than an S rank, he needed a blacksmith recognized as legendary, but he already had some thoughts about that. Anyhow, Myung looked at Code's body lying on the floor. What should I do? First, using the flaws of the box of trials was successful. It has been confirmed that Code was killed under Wu's name. The rest of the judges will know this truth by now. As Wu wasn't considered dead, sufficient conditions weren't met to leave this area alive. It was because he was made into an undead when he was on the boundaries of death. Indeed, if they thought Wu was dead, there was no way he could receive such a reward. How he was going to use Code was the problem. It was the best evidence to make Wu the killer. If he left it alone, people will believe that Wu was the killer and he will be solely responsible for the crime. But, it still seemed unfortunate. Myung believed that Code's material was worth more than the other judges. She even had a story. It was really a waste to dispose of her story with Wu. I must hide it. There was no need for a lot of evidence. The corpses of the rest of the judges were enough evidence for others to see. While everyone else was busy looking elsewhere, he used the art of death skill. A black aura emitted out and wrapped around Code's dead body. Level, 81. Type, Demi-Lich. Strength 70, 67 plus 3, Agility 66, 63 plus 3, Stamina 76, 73 plus 3. Intelligence 91, 88 plus 3, Wisdom 95, 92 plus 3, Lightning Power 100, 97 plus 3. Plus Lightning Rune, can strengthen up to 30, by planting them. Plus Rune Explosion, explosion of the one with the Lightning Rune. Plus Lightning Storm, nailing down Sky's Spear's skill is usable. Plus Love Hate, if Blazing Spear Soldier and Sorcerer of Lightning are summoned together, all of their stats will increase by 3. Myung nodded in satisfaction. Love Hate, it was outstanding for a buff. Indeed, the art of death skill certainly relied on the story of the undead. It was newly found information that relationships before their deaths had an effect. Lightning runes could be used on the prince and his subjects. It didn't seem like a bad idea in making Code into an undead. An amazing scene could be pictured if lightning runes were placed on the 30 ghouls summoned by Prince and his subjects and if they all exploded. Right away, Myung made the Sorceress of Lightning into a talisman and placed her inside his infinity pouch. Even though the corpse disappeared into thin air, it was an incredibly intense battle. It wasn't odd to find the body disappear without a trace. Afterward, when he turned his head, he found that the fight was slowly coming to a stop. The faces of the 3 judges wrinkled. Wu killed Code. He's crazy. Well, he was naturally not a normal person. But, it will only be his last frantic attempt. What could he do with a bunch of beginners? Unlike their disregarding tone, they seemed a bit nervous. They were completely unaware that Wu was turned into an undead when he was still alive. By the way, why would Wu hang around with those bugs? Isn't it because he is the child of the Shallow Fire Dragon clan? But, if Wu turned against us, it would be dangerous for us to move alone. How do you want to do this? Even if they were overflowing with bravado, they weren't going to be reckless about it. Unlike Wu, they were members of the 5 great clans. It was the same for Code, but if Code had died, it was necessary for them to be cautious. I don't like the fact that we all have to act together to fight against someone like Wu, but, it can't be helped since he was the one to ruin our plan in the first place. We need to teach him why the 5 great clans are known as the 5 great clans. It wasn't like they were in a good relationship with Wu in the first place. Originally, they didn't acknowledge people other than the 5 great clans. Since it was going to annoying if they were to annoy him and because he was engaged to Code, they decided to let him pass. However, things were different if Wu killed Code. If they were to just withdraw here, it will only confirm that they were scared of the Fire Dragon clan and Fire Dragon Wu. Accuse Wu of the crime outside of the box of trials? Don't. There were many others who could take their place. There was no way the clans would peacefully accept them once they dishonored the clan's face. They should be glad if they weren't disposed. They couldn't just be soft on them as they have until now. Wu. We will definitely kill you. Now, even for them, it was a matter of survival. Gradually, the numbers increased. At first, many people were unsure if Wu really did betray the others, but after Wu killed one of the other judges, Code, their thoughts about him completely changed. After the appearance of the message about Code's death, people started to come out, one by one. After placing T1 and Blazing Spear Soldier on the front lines, Muyong was preparing something from behind. King. The Emperor of Shroom-Ice popped out from the ground. It was very active and was double the size he was in the beginning. King. Where did you come back from? Susie, who was beside it, tilted her head. King's body was covered in dirt. As if it was tired, he came out of the ground and lied down with his belly out. Susie talked as she poked its belly. Mister. Why is King like this? Well, I'm not sure. Muyong denied he knew anything about it and just walked down the road. It wasn't that big of a deal. He was just making a few preparations for the fight. Susie lifted up the droopy King by its neck. Are you a mole? Why did you dig your way out here? Coo. As they waited motionlessly at a designated location, the rest of the three judges appeared. Even from the beginning, they looked at the Blazing Spear Soldier, Fire Dragon Wu, with eyes filled with murderous intent. You crazy bastard! Did it feel good after killing your fiancé? You don't think you could win against us by combining forces with these bugs, right? Just give up trying to leave here alive. They all said something, but Wu did not reply. He just stood there quietly. Since the beginning, as Muyong was controlling him, it could be said that it was obvious. The soldier had intelligence, but he lagged a bit when he spoke. So others would always be able to tell that something was weird when he spoke. As if they accepted his silence as him ignoring them, the judges grinned their teeth. Hyung Neem. Isn't it better to just attack first? T1 asked for Muyong's opinion. However, Muyong shook his head. Just watch them from afar. Yes. Wu will handle them on his own. Would that be possible? I know that he is strong, but they are also judges. T1 was correct. He didn't see it wrong. Even if Wu was strong, the three were also strong. Unless if it was 1 vs 1. There was no chance if it was 1 vs 3. But, Muyong just looked coldly at the fight scene. Go. Thump. The Blazing Spear Soldier stepped forward. I will kill you guys. One sentence. That was enough. As he took the first step on the open field, everyone's gaze was on him. There were about 400 people who were gathered here. If they fought together, there was hope. However, only the soldier moved. At that moment, when everyone was nervously watching them. You foolish bastard! Are you saying that you are going to fight us alone? The judge who was standing in front went down on all fours. An aura of a beast emitted from all over his body. As the rising star from one of the 5 great clans, Beast Clan, who was able to control the strength of a beast. There was a saying that no one could catch up with their strength or agility. Behind him, the other two also joined. Cry of fire! The soldier lifted his spear high in the air. From the beginning, he was planning to use his best skill. The widespread and destructive skill that was even dangerous to the user. Thump! Thwoomp! In an instant, the sky turned red and blazing hail started to rain down. The ground exploded and places were being destroyed. You can't hit me with that shit. However, the judge who was in the shape of a beast was able to avoid the fierce blazing hail. Instantly, he was closing the distance between them. The other two were slow, but were still getting closer while blocking the hail. If it kept on like this, he would be allowing them to attack. But, the tips of Muyoung's lips suddenly went up. Crash! With the soldier in the center, the ground started to sink. What is this? The judges seemed quite taken back. Are you going to commit suicide? The man who had the appearance of beast urgently yelled, but Wu was still unresponsive. Instead, he raised his spear and stopped the judge's movements. He was already half dead, there was no reason for him to fear death. In the end, the judges were destined to sink down as their movements were stopped by the soldier. If they forced their way out, they would be exposed to the cry of fire. The cry of fire was an intense and widespread skill that was even dangerous to its user. The 400-some-odd people were carried away by the scene and looked with their mouths open. Witnesses. Muyoung crossed his arms. He basically gathered the people so that he could increase the number of witnesses. To show that Fire Dragon Wu fought against the rest of the judges. The reason why the ground started to suddenly sink was all calculated by his plan. I meddled with the core of the box of trials. He found the core of the box of trials by using King, the Emperor of Shrew Mice. Muyoung believed that there was a core which constructed and maintained the box of trials buried somewhere underground. As the area, where the core was buried, sucked in magic, it was highly likely for the top layer to be weak. And honestly, he thought it had a 50-50 chance of finding it. Since he believed he was near the great city, he made King look around for it. The results were successful. Since he found out the location of the core, all that was left was to properly shake it. It was the reason why he used the soldier's strongest skill from the beginning. Order them to stop the ones who are coming up. Yes. After Muyoung spoke, T1 asked again. Muyoung just stood there with a cold face. Almost there. However, they couldn't look down on their physical stats. Even though the soldier was stopping them, there was still a chance they would crawl up before they were completely buried. As if T1 understood Muyoung, he nodded and went forward. Surround the area and don't allow them to crawl up. If you have ranged weapons or skills, use them and try to stop their path. There was a fixed range of area where the cry of fire could rain down on. If you just surround the area and stop them, even if they were judges, they couldn't easily crawl out. Accomplices. This way, the 400 people could be considered accomplices. You, bug-like bastards. The man who had a beast-like form grinned his teeth as he stepped on the collapsing ground while trying to escape. However, he was too late to crawl out of it. He tried to crawl up somehow by avoiding the pouring cry of fire and the various of skills people used, but he wasn't successful in finding a gap. Thump. During that time, the wide area collapsed. Like a black hole. Even the place with the core was buried. The indiscriminate pour of the cry of fire had stopped. The messages that popped up. The fight inside the box of trials has ended. Chapter 34, The Avengers, 1. TL, Yoni. Edited, Yoni, Mayanai. Sponsored, TOM555J. Shortly after, messages popped up. The fight inside the box of trials had ended. Crash. The ground shook and soon the air started to split. Muyoung knew right away that the area where a light was leaking out was the exit. However, Muyoung looked down at the collapsed ground for a moment before he heading towards that direction. It seems like it would be hard to salvage them. Muyoung summoned the blazing spear soldier back into a talisman right after reading the message that Wu had killed the rest of the judges. Possibly due to the characteristics of the undead or because he recalled the soldier before he was completely buried, it didn't seem like he was completely destroyed to the point beyond recovery. However, the other three judges were different. Their bodies would have been completely destroyed. Even if the rescue team searched for them, they would probably only find some remains of the corpses. Clang! He scratched his cheek after tossing a rock down the large hole. It didn't seem possible for him to go down alone since it was at least a few hundred meters deep. 3 rewards. He took his mind off the matter and thought of the rewards he received. One of the rewards was the secret medicine of the sage. It was a rare medicine that would randomly enhance a single stat. There wasn't a downside in enhancing a lot of stats. The other 2 were Night Crystal and Fairy's Wing Powder. Although they weren't as great as the secret medicine of the sage or the piece of the earth dragon's skin, they were still quite useful. What is that? A light? If we follow the light, does it lead us to a safe area? People could only be confused when a light appeared once the fight ended. As Muyong started to slowly walk, Tiwan quickly took the lead and settled the people down. First, let's all gather. Let's find and gather up the people who aren't here right now and leave this place altogether. A total of 650 people. More than double the number had survived, a lot more than the conditions to survive. The gazes directed at the people who hid weren't great, but the pleasant feeling that they had finished the trial and survived was much greater. Naturally, they relaxed their hearts and their guard against each other went down. Kid. You fought well in a place like this, hey. I'm not a kid, but my name is B. Susie. Haha. Sure, kid. Ah, damn. I told you I'm not a kid. Ha ha ha. People started to gather around Susie. They were amazed that a young girl had survived until now, but it was also because of the characteristics of the Valkyrie of Dawn. Her real father, he just lowered his head from afar. In all honesty, he would have died more than 10 times already if Tiwan and the rest didn't accommodate him. People didn't say much because Susie did about 1.5 times the work of others, but it seems like he had a lot more on his mind. The thought that his existence was rather holding Susie back. He started to understand more and more about how power was more important than affection in this world. Susie's father approached Muyong. Muyong was looking past the light with a stiff face before he turned his head. Can I talk to you for a moment? He unenthusiastically nodded. Speak. Is there any way for me to get stronger? At least, to the point where I won't hold my daughter back. Do you want to get stronger? He stole a glance at Susie laughing and talking with the others. Yes. If it goes on like this, I would only be a large baggage to her. That kid is strong and bright. She never complained while she was growing up. Even when I was fired from my job and when my wife and I divorced, she was the only one who patted my back. Muyong just coldly gazed at him. Susie's father sorrowfully continued his words. I can't die now. Until she can be completely independent, even right now, I'm aware that I'm holding her back. But, if I die now, I know that she won't be able to bear it. Since her sense of responsibility is strong, I know she is forcing herself, but in reality, she is more soft-hearted than anyone else. So please, tell me a way I can get stronger. He seemed desperate. He looked as though he thought about it tens and hundreds of times and became even more discouraged before approaching Muyong. Muyong thought about the time when his 2 arms were cut off. Only 3 received medicine as a reward for hunting. Out of the 3, Tiwan gave his medicine to him and was able to avoid death. However, it would have been impossible if he didn't have a strong will to live. There is no way for a crippled person to get stronger. Muyong bluntly spoke. Could you imagine an armless soldier? Most skills couldn't be even used without arms. Even if there was a possibility, they could only dream of moving skillfully. Others would think it was basically a miracle for him to survive until now, but that luck wouldn't work in the underworld. Thump. Susie's father kneeled. Muyong frowned. I will do anything. When I die, I will let you have my body. I don't want much. I just want to know a way. If you could just let me know of a way, that is enough. He was willing to give up his dead body. He seemed determined. For a moment, Muyong wiped his chin. Story. If nothing else, his story seemed magnificent. The material wasn't that great, but didn't the art of death skill placed more importance on the story? However, no matter how much he thought about it, an armless undead made from a normal human body didn't seem very useful. It was at that moment. Authority. This never happened before, probably because no one had ever clung on to him this desperately, but Myung was very interested. Making a contract with me by using his life as collateral. In return, he needed to help him achieve his goal. This is no different than a devil's contract. Myung secretly laughed. If you looked at the content, there was nothing weird about calling it a devil's contract. Death, using their soul as collateral to fulfill their wish. There is nothing better than making materials better. His story was amazing. Therefore, if they were to make a contract of death, there was no need to think about it. After thinking that far, he thought of an idea which he didn't think of in the beginning. Even if the possibilities were low, it wasn't like there was no way for Susie's father to become stronger. Rather, wasn't it better to break through that low possibility and fulfill his goal of getting stronger? If you really desire a way, I will let you know. It might be helpful depending on how hard you try. Thank you. Thank you. Even though it wasn't something he should really be happy about, maybe it was because he didn't understand the meaning properly that he cried in rejoice. Right after, a dot had appeared on top of his forehead. Myung could only be a bit doubtful, as it never told him how he was going to be notified when the subject died or how he was going to retrieve the body. Since they said by authority, it couldn't be a sham. Authority. The top 10 humans would have at least one power that could be called an authority. Myung trusted the value of that name. Afterwards, he spoke into Susie's father's ears as if he was whispering. If you pass through that light, soon you will arrive at a location. From there, find a book called The Study of the Darkness Spirit. The Sky Library could only be used once by every person. The people who enter could choose and learn a skill. The problem was there was a massive number of skills, and for high-ranked skills, it was set up that they had to pass a few trials to earn them. And among them, the study of the darkness spirit was a considerably high-ranked skill. Even in the underworld, there weren't a lot of people who could control the spirits. And in reality, even if they had learned the skill, if they didn't have the expertise, they weren't able to make a contract with a spirit. It was like a gamble. Normally, liches would learn the study of the darkness spirit, but this was the only way for a cripple like him could get stronger. If he succeeded, his story would become more impressive. He had something to protect and to do that he would need to desperately devote himself towards his goal. Even if he died without getting stronger, it wasn't a loss. Instead, if he was to overcome all trials, there was no reason not to acknowledge him. Not bad. That was right. It wasn't bad at all. He passed through the light. And saw an enormous arena. 650 people, including Myung, were standing in front of a black door in a place that was like an arena with no ceiling. Besides that, there were about 20 black doors, and a minimum of 300 to a maximum of 400 people were lined up in front of each door. Most faces looked very pale and were grinding their teeth. Especially, there were girls and boys who looked to be judges that were part of the groups. However, the people who greeted them were at least 10 times their number. An enormous number of people were on top of the arena stairs and were all looking down at them, as if they were looking at monkeys at a zoo. 9 guilds, 5 great clans. And the rest. Myung instantly recognized them. Even if he returned to the past, there was no way he would not be able to recognize them. The underworld. Myung's face stiffened. He had finally arrived. This can't be possible. Out of the people who were watching, the 650 people, including Myung, someone yelled out loud. Fire Dragon In. The leader of the Fire Dragon clan. It was Wu's father. On top of the highest and widest area of the arena, his whole body was shivering. Where did the rest of the kids go? Did those kids really lose? That wasn't all. The leaders of the 5 great clans who were sitting near Fire Dragon Inn were all standing up looking puzzled. Even though there were other groups that met the conditions and eliminated the judges, it was very rare, and even they were unable to kill all 5 judges. At most, 2. However, not even one of the 5 judges was visible. This could only mean one thing: the judges' complete defeat. Since the impossible happened, it was obvious that there would be a commotion. Hyung Neem. Where do you think we are at? The location for the selection. Yes. If you just quietly watch, you will know. Myung motionlessly watched them. There was a total of 20 boxes of trials. And about 7,000 beginners had passed the trial. Every group's goal was to recruit the exceptional people after continuously screening them. Even now, few recruiters who had the information-gathering skills were publicly scheming through them. Of course, the limitation of their skill was that they would only be able to look at the numerical value of the stats, but Myung didn't mind, as he has already used the information distortion talisman to trick their eyes. As expected, I can't find him. When Myung looked around, there were no signs of Wang Chunglin. However, Myung was sure that he was somewhere around here. Myung didn't relax. Screech. The doors of the arena opened and about 10 people with helmets and equipment adorned with a sun approached them. It seems like Alexandro Quintart prepared this event. The guild master of the Sun Guild, Alexandro Quintart. One of the top 10 humans. In fact, this arena was one of the places the Sun Guild maintained. A few men who were wearing the sun helmet entered the black door, and one man stayed behind and asked, "Can you tell me what happened inside in detail?" "Shit. Is this some joke? What are you planning to do? Aren't we returning back to where we originally came from?" Unlike the rest who were carefully looking around, a man in the back ranted and raved. The person couldn't understand the current situation where he was being observed like a monkey in a zoo when he barely survived after thinking that he could return to where he came from if he just passed the grand trial with the judges. Please choose your words carefully. Great figures are present. What? Great figures? This shit. Bang. The man wearing the sun helmet placed his thumb and his middle finger together. Clank. Then a transparent wall fell from the sky and imprisoned the swearing man. Blaze. Soon, an intense flare erupted inside the wall. Knock. 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 The man screamed as he slammed against the transparent wall, but in an instant, the fire completely burned the man. It was a horrifying tragedy. Afterwards, the man wearing the sun helmet asked again, "Can you tell me what happened inside in detail?" Chapter 35, The Avengers, 2. TL, Mayanai. Edited, Mayanai, Yoni. Sponsored, TOM555J. That is. I'll say it. When T1 was avoiding the question, Myung stepped forward. After all, if they were to investigate, they would naturally arrive at Myung. Since he was the first one to have contact with Wu, he decided it would be better to come out before they found any faults. As the man wearing the sun helmet nodded, Myung acted as if he was talking about something insignificant and opened his mouth. The judge Fire Dragon Wu betrayed the other 4. "What did you just say? He helped us attack the other judges. And as a result, they all died. Is that the truth? If you're lying, I won't be able to assure your safety. Why would I risk my life with a lie that could instantly be proven false?" Myung had nothing to hide. Since the rest of the 650 people saw the same thing. The man wearing the sun helmet examined the people behind Myung. He didn't find any traces of falsehood from their reactions. "Could you tell me the situation in more detail?" Myung had seen Fire Dragon Wu's status viewer. History was like a stream. Although there was no way to know the finer details, he could know the significant events that had occurred in Fire Dragon Wu's life since birth. There were also some he found out when he had previously infiltrated the Fire Dragon clan. So it was enough if he could slightly adapt the truths to match his story. Fire Dragon Wu seemed to have been driven to a corner. I didn't know why, but he was impatient to show off his skills. He mumbled how he wouldn't be able to prove anything by facing against us weaklings. Gulp. The man wearing the sun helmet couldn't help but become slightly nervous. If it was false, how could Muyong know the current situation of the Fire Dragon clan? The Fire Dragon clan had adopted a son and, as a result, it was common knowledge that Fire Dragon Wu's position in the clan was obscure. However, Muyong was a beginner who had only spent a month in the temple. There was no way he could have known that. Although it was hard to believe that those words came from Fire Dragon Wu's mouth, the words Muyong said were all true. But because of this, there was a concerning matter. So that's why even Lady Code. Are you talking about that girl who used lighting? Right. Fire Dragon Wu definitely killed her. Bastard. Crash. The head of the Fire Dragon clan, Fire Dragon In, who was standing on top of platform shot to the ground. With an incredible killing intent, he stared at Muyong as if he would kill him if he said another word. It's been a while. It felt like a long time since he had felt this much killing intent from someone. His breath became stifled and each cell in his body was on edge. However, even so, Fire Dragon In was still a coward. Fire Dragon In was one of the figures who would choose to settle than struggle. 20 years of struggling, 30 years of comfort. It had already been 50 years since humans have started being summoned into the underworld. At first, the demons were quite aggressive and humanity had to fight to survive. For 20 years, they slowly expanded their territory and at the same time, were able to reclaim a great city as well as a few other cities. However, afterwards, the attack from demons and the demon gods had stopped. People changed from fighting to protecting what they had. As a result, everyone settled down and this continued for 30 years. In 10 years, the great calamity will start. There was no way to know why the demon gods had stopped their attack. At one point, they just stopped attacking. However, even that would end in 10 years. After 10 years, once all humans have been summoned into the underworld, the great calamity will start and the demon gods will more aggressively corner humanity. No, at that point, the demon gods would lead the way. It was definitely different when they previously only sent demons. After killing the supreme magician Merlin at the Blue Temple first, the 9 guilds and 5 great clans would collapse one after another under the cruel massacre. This was why Muyong wasn't afraid of the killing intent emitted from Fire Dragon In who stagnated after settling down. He was still a coward. A man who kept his feet on the ground was unable to kill a man who attempted to climb the skies. How dare you lash your short tongue out to deceive the Fire Dragon clan? The truth will be clear as day once the investigation team goes in. Isn't there no need for me to lie? At this moment, Fire Dragon In's insides must have been burning. The Lawless clan was one of the 5 great clans and although there were many who could replace Code, she was still a part of their strength. Perhaps it would have been different if there was no relationship between them but for Fire Dragon Wu to have killed Code, who was his fiancé. It was inevitable that the relationship between the 2 clans would break down. Fire Dragon In's goal of raising the Fire Dragon clan to become one of the 5 great clans became difficult. Do you need to die for you to shut your mouth? However, Muyong didn't even blink. The possibility of Fire Dragon In killing Muyong was extremely low. It didn't look good for someone as established as him to punish a beginner. Above all, people could be suspicious that he killed him to shut him up. Killing to keep a secret. If he was to erase evidence in front of everyone's presence, the status of the Fire Dragon clan would completely dissipate. He cannot kill me. Muyong didn't take the lead for no reason. There was no way for the head of the Fire Dragon clan to not know this. In fact, because he was so calculating, he knew he could not lay a hand on Muyong at this time. It was just that if he was to stay still, it would be the same as admitting Fire Dragon Wu's betrayal. The hell horse was hidden somewhere as it observed Muyong. It was indeed a top-ranked monster. Its stealth ability was high enough to avoid the eyes of the strong. Even Muyong never had a hunch on where the horse may be up until now. Even though it said it would help, it would only take Muyong away from the crowd of powerful humans, but even that was incredible. However, there was no reason to use one of his favors. Muyong was certain that Fire Dragon Inn was only trying to scare him. He probably thought that if he got angry, Muyong would kneel and beg for his life. But, once Muyong showed no reaction, his face revealed a hint of impatience. "Head of the Fire Dragon clan, please stop." At that moment, the man sitting in the center of the platform raised his voice. Alexandros Quintart. The man who oversaw the whole situation. The master of the Sun Guild that was contending for first place among the 9 guilds. Fire Dragon Inn wrinkled his face and said, "Just what right do you have to stop me? It was not me but Lawless Gong who first suggested it. First, let's set up an investigation team to investigate." Lawless Gong. If the head of the Lawless clan suggested it, then there was nothing Fire Dragon Inn could do. From this suggestion, they could see that the relationship between the two clans was quickly deteriorating. It meant that he would send the investigation team in to buy some time to find a middle ground. If Fire Dragon Inn was to get even angrier, he would lose the chance he had barely received. Caei. Fire Dragon Inn, who calmed his anger, turned his back. Easily, as if he was planning this from the start. Thump. He then jumped high into the air and returned to the platform. Muyong only slightly smirked. Anyways, he gained enough time to climb the Sky Library. Shortly after, Alexandros Quintart opened his mouth, sitting in the center of the platform. "To all the small heroes that completed all the trials, we welcome you." There was no way to know if those small heroes referred to the beginners or the boys and girls who were judges. However, all the beginners, including Muyong, could not find those words pleasing. The fact that the judges were affiliated with them was revealed. "They indiscriminately killed people in there, yet they say they welcomed us? Bastards!" Someone quietly scoffed. However, if he was to say it outright, he would immediately lose his life. As they were weak, they had no right to speak. Muyong clicked his tongue. Since they were starting their acceptance, it was going to be much more relaxing than the trial before. "This place is the underworld. We are at war with the demon gods of the 72 seats. If we do not defeat the demon gods, we will never be able to return to Earth." Earth. It was already a name they missed. It was the secret word that could slightly divert the uncomfortable expressions of the people. "Let us go back to Earth together. For that, please lend us your strength. We are going to explain everything to those who have passed the difficult trial and give you a chance to decide." The Sky Library. A long speech had started. Even though he spoke softly, his words somehow stuck to their heads. Alexandros Quintart had activated his Bewilderment of the Sun skill. If time continued to pass, they would slowly be swayed and truly trust and follow the people who tried to kill them. In some sense, he had some similarities with Wang Chunglin. After talking for around 20 minutes, Alexandros Quintart smiled as he finished. "We welcome you." The celebrations had started. Most the areas of the great city became public and the beginners had the right to go anywhere besides the castle in the center. Those who exited the arena could only be astonished. The castle stretched out endlessly. The buildings lined up were so tall, they would not lose out to modern cities, and the castle walls didn't lose out to the Great Wall of China. The ancient king's castle. Strictly speaking, this castle, like the Sky Library, wasn't man-made. It was only that they released a talisman containing the ancient king's castle here. Because of that, there were still unknown places within the castle. For example, the hallway with no shadows during a full moon, which was used as a route for assassinations, and the underground tunnel that would lead to a special place every 14 days. They weren't all that great, but it wasn't bad to keep note of them. "This group can stay here. A soldier wearing a sun helmet herded about 100 people including Weung into an inn. Since 650 people couldn't use one inn, they were split up into groups. When can we enter the Sky Library? Susie's father asked. His body was at its limit. He asked since he instinctively aware that the study of the darkness spirit Weung mentioned was located in the Sky Library. Only 300 people can enter the Sky Library at once. If you wait, we will come take you there in the morning when it's your turn. So that's how it is. I understand. Once the small question was answered, everyone entered the inn. On the first floor of the inn, a plentiful array of foods was prepared. I think it's been a long time since I've seen these kinds of foods. Let's eat first. While everyone was deeply moved and rushed to pick up their forks, Weung quietly went up to the second floor and unpacked. Was this an unavoidable destiny? Weung looked around his room and shook his head. This inn was the exact same one Weung stayed in the past. He was kidnapped here and used as an assassin for a long time. He had killed countless heroes. Tonight. Weung took a deep breath and calmed himself. Wang Chenglin's beginner hunt would commence tonight. Deep into the night of a full moon. Everyone was passed out drunk. There was an endless supply of alcohol, and because it had been a long time since they could get drunk, their hearts relaxed. Swish! With the speed of light, a man wearing a mask flowed through the window. The masked man looked around after spreading sleeping powder. He spotted a man sleeping on a bed and cautiously approached him with light steps. Just when he was about to attack the man on the bed. Grasp! His opponent's closed eyes suddenly opened and grasped the masked man's throat. He precisely hit a pressure point and the masked man couldn't make a sound. The opponent stared at the masked man with a completely expressionless face and quietly said, "It's been a long time, number 447. Chapter 36, The Avengers, End. TL, Yoni. Edited, Yoni, Mayanai. Sponsored, Anonymous and Nightangel 191. He spoke with a dull emotionless tone. However, there were ripples in Weung's eyes. It's not hard to kill him again. Even if it was an illusion, Weung had already happily killed assassins including Wang Chenglin in the trial of Gremory, the Star of David. Weung had not once regretted his decision. Even if he was put in the same situation, he will redo what he had done. His firm determination allowed him to pass the trial at the Star of David. Did Wang Chenglin send you? To procure materials to create an assassination machine. The eyes of the assassin who entered the room were also completely calm. Weung wasn't able to feel any emotions from him. It was because he was a puppet. However, the process of making a puppet was unbearably horrifying. Following Chenglin's orders, after hundreds of materials are collected, only 1% of them would survive. The surviving 1% would be then castrated from all emotions and would become a marionette on a string. Weung chuckled. He could only laugh. He couldn't understand why he bothered to talk to him when he knew already that the man would not reply. Was it because he still hoped he might reply? From the position Weung was in, he just lifted his upper body, sat on the side of the bed, and spoke. Right, we didn't exist even from the start. Crack! The man's neck snapped. And the eyes of an assassin were turned off. He was instantly killed. Weung quietly turned his head and gazed at the red full moon. Including Weung, assassins were the ones who normally lived in the shadows. Since they could never come out into the light, it was like they didn't exist. Shadows. They were the ones who existed but weren't really there. Even if they were alive, it was no way of living as no one will mourn for their death. Don't you want to revenge him? The man who filled himself up with your blood. The already dead body didn't move a muscle. However, Weung looked at the eyes of the dead man, feeling what was beyond those eyes. He thought he was feeling the trembling cry of his soul. Art of death. The dark aura which emitted from his entire body touched the corpse of the assassin. Level, 58. Type, Shadow Ghoul. Strength 50, Agility 80, Stamina 50. Intelligence 15, Wisdom 15, Darkness Aura 55. Plus very high resistance to darkness. Plus high movement speed in darkness. Plus Binding of the Darkness, Shadow Hide, and crit skills are usable. Plus you get closer to darkness as your darkness aura increases. Nothing particularly changed on the outside. But, his eyes were emitting a fierce beast's aura. He was definitely more assimilated in darkness. Prince and his subjects. Right away, Muyong summoned the Dark Ghoul. The Dark Ghoul was able to select up to 30 ghouls and increase all their stats by 5. Avenger was a ghoul-type undead. Just in time, he had extra space from the fight with the fire dragon Wu. With this, he was now able to summon the Avenger when he summoned the Prince and his subjects. Since he only needed the Dark Ghoul to maintain the effect, he summoned back the regular ghouls. Even though he was a low-ranked assassin, this should do. The Forest of Death always operated with 500 assassins. The lower the number, the stronger the person, and the higher the number, the weaker the person. In the past, of course, Muyong was number 1. Since Chunglin had died, you could say he was in reality number 0. Number 447 meant that he was low-ranked within the Forest of Death. Either way, only low-ranked assassins would go out to hunt for beginners. The Forest of Death operated under the silent protection of all the guilds and clans. Therefore, it was possible for the low-ranked assassins to wander around the great city. All the big shots lived inside the castle in the middle of the great city, so there wasn't anyone who could restrain them. Wang Chunglin isn't here. At first, Muyong believed that Chunglin would be somewhere around here. However, after looking at a couple of places in the great city, he concluded that Chunglin wasn't here. If he was here, the Hell Horse would have tried to make him use up one of his favors. The horse would be willing to protect him if a situation arose where someone whom Muyong was unable to win against was present. Its stealth ability was so great that even Muyong was unable to tell where it was. None of the strong currently gathered here were able to sense the Hell Horse. That meant that Chunglin's presence could potentially be found. But, wasn't it quiet? That meant the stage was set for Muyong to freely act. I will gather your brothers. Muyong wasn't planning on having number 447 be all alone. After making all the assassins here into the undead, his goal was to take all 500 of the members and make a surprise attack on Chunglin. Muyong took out his talisman and took out his equipment. The lunatic sovereign's set. He went out of the window after putting his red cape and his red helmet on. Shush! Behind him, the Dark Ghoul and the Avenger followed. It wasn't the best move to search every place and rule them out one by one. First, how efficiently they did this was a big problem. Muyong only had his own body while there were many assassins. There should be about 100 low-ranked assassins currently active. That was why Muyong waited at a path where they will commonly pass. The great city was just a location where they used a special talisman to release the ancient king's castle. Secret hidden pathways existed and Muyong knew the locations of such pathways very well. On a night of a full moon, a place where even the shadows weren't reflected. It was a path that led to the underground tunnel and was also a place that couldn't be detected from afar. Muyong stood outside the stream of consciousness. Soon, 4 assassins who kidnapped beginners discovered him as they approached. Muyong welcomed them when he was still wearing his lunatic sovereign's set. No conversation was needed. Showing them was enough. He took out Anguish and ran straight towards them. Slash! It was even before they placed down the beginners. Muyong was half a step faster. Stab! Muyong just broke off their swords and stabbed Anguish into their hearts. Cough! Cough! Anguish hungrily devoured the dripping blood. Slash! Muyong turned his body while pulling out Anguish. The assassin beside him placed his hand on top of Muyong. Crack! Muyong grabbed hold of his wrist and twisted it. However, assassins were resistant to pain. Muyong didn't stop after he twisted the assassin's arm. Bosh! From his position, he just lifted his elbow and smacked the man's chin. Anguish headed for the man's heart like a snake when he fell down from a concussion. Swish! And without giving away any signs, he took out 2 daggers from his bosom and threw it behind his back. Clank! One fell on the floor but the other one avoided by hitting it away. Myung just looked into his eyes. Under a silent night, the assassin ran towards Myung. There was no turning back for them as their identities were revealed. Items that were to be disposed of after being used. Chunglin never recycled. He could just create another if one dies. That was why Myung showed how furious he was with his actions. It could be called a fighting aura. The surrounding air and magic all started to rotate around Myung. Myung knew everything about assassins of the Forest of Death, including their insignificant actions and habits. Their breathing pattern and even the rhythm of their beating heart. Myung had figured out everything about them as he wanted to assassinate everyone and finally kill Chunglin. He didn't miss even the slightest detail. They are all the same but slightly different. That was how Myung knew that they weren't just normal puppets. The small habits they had while they were alive didn't change no matter how many times they were corrected and brainwashed. For example, the assassin in front of him. Number 493. You still limp your right foot. Myung laughed as he showed his teeth. Since number 493 was born, both his foot didn't balance. If he did get a corrective surgery, it could have been fixed, but after he became an assassin, he kept limping his right foot as a habit. As Myung laughed, he ate up number 493's heart as the assassin approached him. The 4 assassins lied dead on the cold floor. Art of death. But, they were revived. In the past, they were colleagues, now they were reborn as allies. That's how Pitch Dark Avengers revived one after the one, under the red moonlight. The number of Avengers increased. Myung released them as they were. Myung couldn't guard all the allies by himself. And the Avengers started to hunt down only assassins. Of course, even with the buff from the prince and his subjects, it wasn't going to be easy. But, if he added another effect, the story would be different. Sorceress of Lightning. The demi-lich created from Code's dead body, from the Lawless clan. The Sorceress of Lightning could place a special effect on a target. Lightning Rune. The Lightning Rune would strengthen its targets. Their strength and stamina increased by about 4 to 6. Although it varied slightly, each one would also have all their stats increased by 5, which allowed them to move beyond what they were capable of before. The Avengers infiltrated deeper into the darkness. Since they were ordered to only use hidden pathways of the castle, there was no way for them to be caught. And, dead assassins started to arrive in front of Myung. All low-ranked assassins, under 400. The ones in the 300s were considered mid-ranked. The ones in the 200s were considered high-ranked and the ones in the 100s were top-ranked. It was like that. If there were assassins from number 400 to 500 currently active, either way, he was catching about 100 assassins. Tying down Wang Chunglin. Myung objectively understood himself. For now, all he could do was hold Chunglin back. From the beginning, there was no Chunglin and only the low-ranked puppets were active. What was his reason to release all the low-ranked? To kidnap the beginners and to increase his number of puppets. So, the best he could do to hold him back was to stop him from hunting the beginners. Just today is enough. Even if the 9 guilds and the 5 great clans were overlooking them, they couldn't overlook assassins roaming around the great city every night. At the longest, just tonight. If the assassins were active again after tonight, they would step on them and kill them like bugs. It only looked like this on the outside, but, of course, there were more cases of these large groups using the Forest of Death as a tug of war. It was a sort of a promise. Since they would present themselves for show even if their insides were rotten. Even if the Forest of Death was amazing, they existed only because of the agreement between the giants. Anyways, the number of Avengers was continuously increasing. So that after 30 Avengers were filled in, there was a change to the talisman. Evolution of a talisman. Normally, you needed 5 of the same talisman to reinforce the talisman. But, this time, it was beyond a reinforcement and was closer to an evolvement. It was a surprising event which occurred as the talisman combined with the art of death. So there is even a method like this. Even Weong didn't expect this to happen. Chapter 37, Azura, 1. A new idea. It wasn't bad since it was another way for him to increase his strength. Weong took it positively. Soon, the dark ghoul's body became a bit bigger and moved with more agility. Grok. Graok. His nature seemed to have become fiercer. By the influence of the dark ghoul, the Avengers' eyes became more ferocious. The name Avengers really suited them as they craved for blood. This was beyond Weong's control. The corpse aren't intact. Weong knit his brows. The almost mangled up corpses of low-ranked assassins started to arrive. Because of this, his frequency of casting the art of death skill had decreased, but he didn't mind it. Either way, he was able to completely hold Wang Chunlin back. The failure to collect beginners and the loss of his low-ranked assassins had to be a blow for Chunlin. Zap! At that moment, a signal in Weong's head was cut off. That meant that one of the Avengers had died. They started to retreat. And the last few moments of the ghoul's vision flashed through Weong's head. He couldn't control undead which were spread out, but like this, information could be sent in when an undead died. As he watched the memories that flew into his head, Weong found many groups. About 30 assassins were moving together and leaving the great city. Number 400. And within the group, one caught Weong's eyes. Assassins whose number ended in A00 were remotely controlled by Chunlin. It was the same as a signal relay. It was a method designed to move assassins more systematically and easier. It was obvious that Wang Chunlin had noticed that something went completely wrong with his plan and ordered them to retreat and leave the great city with the rest of the assassins. Weong quickly made his decision. Blaze. He lit the corpses on fire with a cold blue face. He was regretful that he couldn't take all his past brothers with him, but if they were to become Avengers in their current state they wouldn't have been useful. Instead, it was better to send them off peacefully. Right after he put them on fire, Weong started to move with all the Avengers, his red cape fluttering behind him. There were many ways to leave the great city, but there was only one path Chunlin frequently used. The underground tunnel, which changed its structure every 14 days. It was a place no one entered because it was filled with filthy waters and rats, but the only advantage of a place like this was that it was unguarded. Normal underground tunnels had magical barriers in preparation for outside intruders. Guards and traps were routinely placed to protect these tunnels. It would be quite annoying for anyone who tried to sneak through secretly. But this pathway which Weong was in, wasn't known to anyone else. Even the top members of the two great forces, the Sun Guild and the Lawless Clan, that ruled over the great city didn't know of this secret place. Only Wang Chunlin knew of this place. No, only Weong and Chunlin knew of this place. However, Chunlin didn't know that Weong knew about this place. That little difference would lead Chunlin to failure. I was waiting. Swoosh. Weong pulled out Anguish. As around 30 assassins who were heading towards Weong hesitated, the Avengers immediately surrounded them. The originally low-ranked assassins were currently strengthened. The Avengers were enhanced as a couple of buffs overlapped. They were as strong as a mid-ranked monster. Crack! Rib! The enraged Avengers all started to go crazy. Weong climbed a wall and darted towards number 400. Clash! Who are you? A sword met with another. Number 400 directly looked at Weong. Wang Chunlin. You've personally decided to involve yourself in this. The tips of Weong's lips started to go up. He who was simply ordering them had borrowed the body of number 400 and appeared. Anguish violently slashed through the air as it craved for blood. A detailed attack that a normal low-ranked assassin wouldn't be able to block was blocked by him. If you put it simply, he was only possessed, but, just by adding Chenglin's fighting senses, he seemed like a completely different person. How do you know this route? Composed. From the tone of his voice, he could sense the composure that only the absolute strong could have. However, Muyong never exposed his full strength. He was facing the opponent with pure technique. And as the fight continued, he was sure of one thing. I can win. He was certain that he could win against Wang Chenglin without much difficulty if he was to gain enough strength as he did in the past. Chenglin's skills were fast and detailed like a snake, but Muyong was able to break through all of it. If they used the same skills, why couldn't he break through those skills and movements? Where did you learn them? Wang Chenglin. How do you know that name? He, who was borrowing the body of number 400, was speechless. He never thought that there was anyone in this world who would know of his name. Chenglin was a person who lived in the shadows. As he never was projected in anyone's conscious, there was no real person who knew of his name. Except Muyong. Thrust. His left shoulder was sliced off. As he lost his balance and was staggering, Muyong ended the fight by piercing anguish into his belly. I know who you are, but you don't know who I am. You bastard, who are you? His face was covered by the lunatic sovereign's helmet. As of right now, there was no way for Chenglin to find out about Muyong's identity. So, Muyong spoke a short warning as if he was whispering. Wait for me. I will go to you. The kidnapped beginners only woke up the morning of the next day. Where? What's that even? However, blood was spread out everywhere and only burnt corpses were lined up. It seemed like the situation had settled after the guards who were patrolling took them to their inns. However, a doubt still remained. Who kidnapped them and why they were lying down with a bunch of burnt-up corpse? Some testified that they caught a glimpse of a ghoul-like monster, but, besides a few, most believed that they were just seeing things. Great guilds and clans were secretly trying to find the culprit, but there was no way they could find a person who had disappeared like a ghost. However, a few people shivered in fear. The Slayer. The Slayer of the Tower has returned. Lunch, the next day. Muyong was listening to the explanation with a bunch of people on the first floor of the inn. We, the Polonia Guild, are made up of a small number of about 50 elites. We can proudly say that we have been around for 30 years with our own tradition. Right now we have 4 spots available and we are seeking people who would fill in those spots. If you join us, we will fully support you. Oh, we are hoping to find people with stamina above 40. Lunchtime. Out of the blue, a man showed up and started to talk. While others were paying attention to the man, Muyong slowly savored his soup. The 9 guilds and the 5 great clans have already finished contacting people. The people who have been coming over were only small groups who were short on members. As he turned his head, he found Tiwan and Suzy blankly staring at the floor with a quite serious look on their faces. Someone had already contacted them. Even those great guilds and clans couldn't help but covet people who had the potential to be great. As it was good to have lots of outstanding slaves. Of course, no one approached Muyong, who used the information distortion talisman to hide himself. Technically, an assassin approached him, but it wasn't to recruit him but to kidnap him. It was hard to say that he was a welcoming guest. Actually, Muyong could sense a magical scent on Tiwan and Suzy. Indicator skill. The people who approached them left an indication on them. That was why the assassins avoided them. Muyong knew that the beginners with an indication were removed from the list of people who they were to kidnap. Us, the Polonia Guild, knows more about the Sky Library than anyone else. You should already know by now that you could earn a skill that you want from the Sky Library. It is really stupid to enter the library without any information. Since what you learn from there will determine your future path and your lifespan. It is necessary for you to learn a skill that's right for you. Many people were interested in the man who was speaking in front of the entrance. There weren't just huge groups in the great city. There were small groups who were busily running around to recruit beginners. Even if there were a lot of reasons, they were mostly after the skill a beginner could learn from the Sky Library. They are probably trying to get people to learn a skill that could be useful to their group or will be helpful in having them pass a trial. There basically was no real group who had pure intentions on helping beginners and fully supporting them. Most were planning on choosing the skill beginners had to learn and use it to their benefit. The Sky Library was vast with many kinds of skills people could learn. Even if they could only choose one, it was clear that that one skill will have a great impact on their future. Of course, there were kind groups who helped people with pure intentions and did not use them. However, you could count them on your fingers, and even if they did exist, they didn't last and disappeared after a few years. And from the looks of it, Myung thought the Polonia Guild was an outstanding bully. Those who are truly willing to help don't place any requirements. Why would they limit their recruitment to people with stamina above 40? It was because the skill they had to learn had a specific requirement to meet, and it was something they needed right away. It was obvious they were trying to use them. In detail, how are you planning to support us? As the woman who was quietly listening to them asked, the man nicely replied back. A full set of C-ranked gear and basic talismans. We will also introduce you to a good hunting area for you to get stronger. Since we have a few priest classes, they will help you get stronger faster. And above all, the man cleared his throat and continued. There was nothing you could say is truly free. Remember that. Even getting water to drink is done by a trade. I promise that if you join our guild, food and shelter will be freely provided. In this world, is there any common currency? The continuous questions could have irritated him, but the man still answered with a smile. Easiest way is by talismans. F-ranked talisman can allow you to eat 3 meals. It's not bad to join a crafting group to make food or items, but because of the poor environment, it wouldn't be easy to survive. I don't really recommend it. The value of currency. It was possible to trade with monster hides and meat, but most commonly used were talismans. And it wasn't like everyone fought. Crafting groups truly did exist. However, most the people who joined were scaredy cats and those with physical disabilities. The exceptions were blacksmiths who were better treated, but their work was twice as hard. Normal artisans were unfriendly towards outsiders, and if they didn't raise their rank by completing their associated skills workmanship, they were frequently cast away. The man shrugged his shoulders. There are only a few guilds and clans that give an incredible offer when they recruit beginners. Even the huge guilds and clans, you know them, right? They massacre beginners. Just because it's big, it doesn't mean it's good. So please properly think over it before you make your decision. As if there were other places he could look for people, he ended his talk and clasped his hands behind his back. Everyone started to read each other's faces. One choice. Everything will be determined by this. But there seemed to be no lies in his words. If they were to lose this chance, could they get a place with better conditions? All the people who suffered from the Blue Temple wanted a place where their safety could be assured. Everyone knew that they needed strength. You said you will accept people with stamina above 40? I will join. As one raised their hand, a few others joined. Me too. Accept me too. I'm missing 1 stamina, but could you please accept me? The Polonia Guild filled their 4 spots in an instant. Even afterwards, a few guilds and clans came by. Guilds were mostly made up of Caucasians and black people, and clans were mostly made up of Asians. There were groups with a mix of different people, but there was some racial discrimination going on behind the scenes. And as the numbers in the inn decreased, the people could only become more nervous. The group of 100 people had been reduced to less than 20 within half a day. This tastes good. Myung didn't care and was silently savoring the taste of the liquor. He couldn't remember the last time he drank. Hyung Neem. As he heard a sound from his side, he turned his head. Taewon sat beside him, and with a serious face, he spoke quietly. An offer came from the Sun Guild. What should I do? The Sun Guild was one of the groups who took care of this great city. Alexandro Quintart. It was a guild where the guild master was also ranked in the top 10 among humans. The Sun Guild was known to only take in less than 10 beginners every month. And a place like this carefully looked at T1 and offered to recruit him. Normally, Myung would have been inattentively glossed over it, but a slight interest rose. Let's talk upstairs. Myung placed down his liquor glass and stood up from his place. Chapter 38, Azura, 2. Two people were facing each other in a small room. Before Myung said anything, T1 opened his mouth. They came yesterday afternoon. They said they would offer me a wide building and B-ranked equipment. It looks like they thought highly of your potential. I don't know. Only, if I had my own estate, could I not separate from everyone and bring them all to my estate? Can't you just do what you want? If the offer isn't bad, there isn't a reason for you to decline. T1 let out a long sigh. That is. Sigh. I heard that even the Sun Guild sent in a judge in the free-for-all fight. They consider human lives as ants. No matter how tempting their offer is, I don't want to join people like them. There was no way everything would be good. T1's face showed complete loathing. On top of that, I find their intentions a bit strange. It didn't seem like they were simply looking at my potential, but it also looked like they were searching for someone. Even asking weird questions. What kind of weird questions? Myung's gaze focused on T1. The Sun Guild was looking for someone. It was highly likely it was under Alexandro Quintart's orders. That if I had my name in Solomon's Hall of Fame from the Blue Temple, they would offer me an even better treatment. An A-ranked weapon and talismans, even a small island. I couldn't answer since I didn't know what it was, but similar questions were asked afterwards. The offer couldn't be any better. It was too much of an investment for just a beginner. To get a small island and receive an A-ranked weapon and talismans were something only the top-ranking members of a moderately sized group would get. Although the Sun Guild exceeded that of a moderately sized group, but to a single beginner, that amount of investment was excessive. Even more, providing information on a top-ranked skill in the Sky Library was uncommon. The competition for information on the Sky Library was fierce, and if one mastered a top-ranked skill, it would disappear. It meant it was impossible for someone else to get the skill. They were going to give someone who wasn't a high level or a rising star that kind of information. Even if they were the Sun Guild, they were unable to give out that kind of information limitlessly. It was hard to take it simply as goodwill. They had a goal. They were straightforwardly luring people out with an offer no one could decline. A reward no group could offer. It was closer to a warning. For no one to aim for their target. The Sun Guild had sufficient power to do so. Just why? It's regretful that I pretty much have no information about the Sun Guild currently. Even Myung couldn't easily stay calm. He didn't have any concrete information about the internal affairs of the Sun Guild at this time. Since there were no requests for assassinating Alexandro Quintart, he was one of the people Myung didn't kill. Rather, he was one of the few who made the most assassination requests. In reality, it could be considered as the pinnacle of these establishments' power. Since the Dragon Lord was assassinated by Myung per Alexandro Quintart's request, for someone like him to intervene meant that it wasn't due to personal feelings. To find the one who entered Solomon's Hall of Fame means they are looking for me. There was a chance that someone besides Myung entered Solomon's Hall of Fame. Since there were many records besides the ones Myung broke at the Blue Temple. However, there were probably not many records that had Alexandro Quintart of the Sun Guild's name on it. At most, he would have done the boss battles Myung had done or something harder. Although he thought that someone could find him, for the first to be the Sun Guild was quite unexpected. Myung was lost in his thoughts for a long time. At that moment, T1 said. Hyung Neem. How about we just make one? What? Something like a guild. I know that Hyung Neem doesn't like taking the lead, but if you are the guild master, at least the people from the same temple would trust and follow you. Muyeong shook his head. I have no thoughts in joining a group. He thought to walk alone. As soon as he joined a group, he could no longer blindly proceed looking forward. There were too many enemies and they were too strong. What was more, Muyeong was a human who didn't associate well with group activities. Since he knew himself well, that kind of suggestion wasn't welcoming at all. Then we need to separate. Won't everyone be nervous? You do it. Pardon. Making a guild, you do it. Muyeong coolly said. If he wanted to join the Sun Guild, he wouldn't have stopped him. Although he hoped for his hero qualities to shine, it wasn't impossible for him to make his way up from the bottom. However, if he wasn't going to join, it was better to walk the path of a sovereign. Of course, it was a thorny path that no one wanted to tread. A tall tree would catch much wind. However, if he could endure, he could make a small wave. The small wave would become rough, then become a tidal wave. A hero was that kind of existence. At least, it was different from the direction Muyeong was going in. Taewon blinked his eyes. It looked like it had never crossed his mind. Taewon was oblivious to his hero qualities. However, a stubborn spirit that wouldn't easily change wasn't something anyone could have. In Muyeong's perspective, he had an imperceptible trait that no other hero he had seen until now possessed. If you really want to spread your values, you must. It will be hard, but if you succeed, you will be able to harvest that much fruit. This was the most advice Muyeong could give. The rest was up to Taewon. Taewon continued to sit in his spot for a long time. Muyeong looked at Taewon for a moment before leaving the room. He had no thoughts of taking the obvious bait. If he didn't have his past memories, he may have grabbed at the Sun Guild's bait, but since he knew how different Alexandro Quintard was on the inside, he was planning on not even showing any traces. When the morning brightened the next day, Muyeong calmly walked around the great city. The building styles that reminded you of the Middle Ages. There were countless individuals gathered, and occasionally beginners were mixed in as well. Recruiters. And among them, there were some who hid their traces and were observing the people around them. They were recruiters who were spread out to look for any hidden pearls that they might have missed. Muyeong openly strutted along the path and showed everyone who spotted him that he had no ability. Various fried skewers that will never appear in this world again. We trade 5 for any magical treasure. You will definitely need small cute hunting dogs. I will draw you a photo-like picture. Leave one as a memory. The great city was in the peak of celebrations. The rush that would only happen once a month. The time when tens of thousands of beginners entered the underworld, items like talismans earned from the Blue Temple and rewards from trials would overflow. Although the strong wouldn't spare a glance, for those that had been here for only a few years or those who had given up on getting stronger, it was their livelihood. The number of people that resided in the great city was close to 1 million. Not everyone could be part of a group or be strong. And as for talismans, no matter how low ranked they were, they could be reinforced or combined, so it was widely used as currency. The beginners who didn't know the importance of talismans had no hesitation. In fact, they seemed too excited that the talismans they thought were useless could be used as currency. There were blessings hidden within the ancient king's castle. Muyeong ignored them and walked around the exterior of the castle. The locations of each building were the same as his memories. Although he walked at his quickest pace, he was barely able to complete a circle by nightfall. This was the hidden function of the ancient king's castle. Though there was a condition to start in the morning and end at night, there weren't many people who knew this. Like this, there were many hidden secrets about the ancient king's castle. Next, I meditate for 2 hours at the clock tower. There was a blessing that increased your stamina by 1 at the clock tower. They were laughable conditional blessings, but it was most likely that the ancient king was an eccentric person who had a great interest in art. It could be deduced by looking at the style of the buildings and their arrangement. He couldn't waste time by waiting to enter the Sky Library. Muyeong moved diligently. A few days later, a man wearing a sun helmet stormed into the inn. Myung, B. Suzy, and Leela Wei, please follow me. He called out 3 people. Myung instinctively knew that it was time to enter the Sky Library. Since only 300 people could enter at once, he thought he would have to wait longer. It was unexpected that he was called second. Mr. Let's go. Suzy, who had spent the past few days worrying, confidently stormed out. It looked like she had made a big decision. Myung briefly looked at her before reminding himself of his goal once again. Eye of the Sky. The skill he must obtain at the Sky Library. He had to obtain that skill at the Sky Library no matter what. A universal window of knowledge that could let you know all the information in the Sky Library. Although information was limited to the skill rank, looking at a single aspect of the library would be of great help. The Eye of Sky was something that could supplement things that Myung never realized. No matter what. He slowly moved his feet. The Sky Library was located on the west side of the castle. Just like its name, the library was floating in the sky. Luckily, there were stairs made up of clouds that led to it. 300 people were gathered in front of the grand entrance and were waiting for the previous group to come out. And a person among them. There's a kid from the Sun Guild. A boy who looked to be about 16 was standing at the very front. He was a likable boy wearing a sun helmet. Around half the people, including the boy, looked very confident. Those that had applied to guilds and clans. They had changed their equipment and they knew information about the Sky Library beforehand. However, the Sky Library was definitely not an easy place. The trial would always change. There was no way they would just hand out free skills. The higher rank skills were set up to be harder to obtain and the trials would change each time. The moment you let down your guard, you would lose your life. Creak. Soon the door of the Sky Library opened and people popped out. Around 220 people. Most of them had their shoulders dangling down. The dark circles under their eyes indicated that they weren't able to get a wink of sleep. They walked down the stair like corpses. Everyone understood that those who did not exit had perished. You can go in now. A man wearing a sun helmet was guarding the surroundings. Once a person took the lead and put out his hand, everyone else lowered their breaths and started to enter the Sky Library. Creak. Thud. The door closed and a long message appeared on the status viewer. Shadow. So it's the spirit affiliation trial. The surroundings were pitch black. A light would come on and off repeatedly every 3 seconds. A low-ranked room 12 shadows. Why is the light constantly going off and on? Although people tilted their heads in doubt, they were able to see that books were lined up all around them due to the blinking lights. An overwhelmingly large area. An endless supply of books lined up in long rows. It felt like it was wider than when they saw it outside. First, let's move. Wait. It looks like there's something on the floor. Gasp. Before they could move, a person was already in his death throes. It was because the person beside him had suddenly attacked. Is this bastard crazy? Since he acted in front of everyone, there was no way he was going to walk on his 2 feet again. At the moment they were about to strike the attacker with eyes filled with anger. This is an order. Beware of the spirits on the floor. And be alert of people with 2 shadows. The boy wearing a sun helmet yelled. His situational judgment is good. Myung silently looked at his surroundings. 11 spirits left. There were spirits that would stop when the lights were on and moved when the lights were off. The spirits could possess the people they touched. The first one had died, so there were 11 left. Chapter 39, Azura, 3. TL, Yoni. Edited, Yoni, Mayanai. People scanned the floor with blazing eyes. However, no matter how good their eyes were, it wasn't easy for them to get used to the brightness and darkness when it changed every 3 seconds. Even if they were able to adapt, it wasn't possible for them to catch all the moving shadows. Ea. 2 shadows. What am I supposed to do? Kill it. Chaos erupted. It was their first time they were facing a trial like this. This was not a normal monster attack. A person next to someone could be possessed by a shadow and attack them. The only way to know if a person was possessed or not was by checking if the person had 1 or 2 shadows. However, no one fully understood how they were supposed to suppress them. We got a hard trial. It was very rare for people to get a trial with spirits where it was hard to do anything. They had to solve the trial by continuously using their wits and agility since physical attacks didn't work. Scrunch. Susie grabbed Myung's clothes. She seemed scared of the spirits of the dead as her body was slightly shaking. She was used to monsters and people dying, but the spirits were on a slightly different level than them. As Myung's gaze reached Susie, she straightened her back. I'm not scared. But can I just stay like this for a moment? Use your Sword of Dawn. Right now. Myung nodded. Susie used her other hand to summon the Sword of Dawn. The Sword of Dawn was created using magical power as its foundation. The light properties of the Valkyrie of Dawn contrasted with the dark properties of the spirits. There was a chance that it would work. A shadow is approaching. When I signal you, slice him. Yes, I understand. A shadow was recklessly storming towards them. Myung's eyes were able to penetrate into the deep darkness clearer than anyone else. Now. Ha! Slash! The Sword of Dawn split straight into the shadow's head. However, the shadow only staggered for a moment, it didn't stop approaching them. Myung grabbed the back of Susie's neck and lifted her up. Like a cat that moved a kitten by biting the nape of its neck, Myung quickly moved away from the area the shadows were located before letting Susie go. It worked, but her abilities weren't enough to slice it. It was Myung's tentative decision. It was difficult to stop the spirits with Susie's power. That meant he needed to find another plan. Since the method of completing spirit trials was always different, it was wise to think of all the possibilities while moving. They must really be ghosts. My attacks don't work. Susie's whole body shivered. Her actions were like that of a small squirrel. At that moment, the boy wearing the sun helmet shouted amidst the chaos. Light! There has got to be a device to turn on the library lights. Find it. It was ironic, but pack animals would always follow the strongest. No matter how many times the Sun Guild acted viciously, currently they could only rely on the boy with the sun helmet. What are you saying? Are you saying that there is a light switch? Quickly, quickly! Following the boy's shout, people moved their legs. Myung quietly clicked his tongue as he looked at the scene. The worst-case scenario. There was a way for no one to die and escape from this place if they had objectively analyzed the situation. If the 300 people stuck together and tied up the 12 who were possessed and left them alone, it could have been solved. However, already one was possessed and the situation was in chaos. He couldn't guarantee that everyone who had different goals would stick together, and now since someone had died already, it would be difficult to get people to stick together. Despite everything, he had hopes on the boy who had the trust of the people, but out of all the choices, he chose the worst-case scenario. If they could quickly find the device that could light up the darkness, it would be fortunate, but to do something like this, the library was too big. The more we scatter, the more people will die. People had already started to spread like a malignant tumor. In an instant, the crowd divided and the chaoticness of the situation had increased. Which side do you want to join? I don't want to go anywhere. When Myung asked, Susie answered right away. She tightly held onto Myung's clothes. Susie had a sense of survival that was greater than anyone else. In other words, it meant that wherever she went, it would be the same result. If that's the case. If he could, he wanted to go the next room by himself, but due to the characteristics of the Sky Library, he needed to complete the first trial to move on to the next. When they complete the trial, the next decision was completely their own to make. To move on to the next trial or to stop there and wait for the door to open in 3 days. Myung looked at the boy wearing the sun helmet. A rising star sent by the Sun Guild. He probably didn't enter here to obtain a mediocre skill. However, his inexperience showed. He seemed to have the unique pride only the members of a big guild had. It seems better to just move alone. Myung shrugged his shoulders. It was a pointless worry. It was like it was already decided beforehand. He quietly walked ahead. Sticking together was the easiest way, but since everything was disoriented from the start, it seemed wiser for him to look around than to just stand there. Horus, the boy wearing the sun helmet, ground his teeth. He was a famous talent who was even named after the Egyptian sky god. From the list of candidates for the next guild master, he was definitely one of the few who stood out and had a strong military force. Even Horus himself was confident that he wouldn't lose to anyone in the same age group as him. However, Horus wasn't the first in line to be the next guild master. He was always considered to be second in line, and he didn't understand why. Why was it a guy weaker than him? There was a large gap between the two. If they fought, he would win 99 times out of 100. However, the weak guy was considered to be the first in line to be the next guild master. He couldn't accept it. Alexandro Quintard had once said something to Horus who was like this. Alexandro said, "You cannot have the qualifications be a sovereign just because you are strong. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous." Strength was power. The authority to have everything was only for the strong. However, Alexandro Quintard was a first generation. He was someone who arrived in the underworld by passing through a gate. On the other hand, Horus was a second generation who was born in the underworld. He let out his first cry in this barren land where the weak and the poor couldn't survive. He believed their values could only be different. Therefore, he had volunteered to enter the Sky Library to prove to Alexandro that his belief was true, that strength was everything. "I will surely earn the lineage of light skill." Of course, he had volunteered for another purpose besides this. When he coincidentally entered a room filled with top secrets of the Sun Guild, he found out that there was a skill called Lineage of Light that existed somewhere in the Sky Library. It stated that they only knew of its existence and didn't know the specific location. But the surprising part was that the Lineage of Light was one of the ways to obtain the Throne of the Sun. The Throne of the Sunday. The ultimate pinnacle the Sun Guild was striving for. Their goal was to become a Helios who would drive a sun's carriage. If he could just reach the ultimate pinnacle, there would be no one who would hold Horus in disregard. Even Alexandro would quietly give him the position of the next guild master. However, in reality, he was at a loss from the beginning. "I never thought it would be a spirit that could evolve." The possessed spirits started to slowly gain a consciousness. They approached in a friendly manner and stabbed their backs. It was a talent that ordinary spirits were not capable of. After possessing someone, they would absorb their victim's knowledge and behave like that person. To make matters worse, the time it stayed dark increased. The only way they were able to tell who was possessed was by looking at the number of shadows the person had, but they couldn't even do that properly. "Be careful of the people who approach you. We need to move together." About 50 people gathered around Horus. If he could, he wanted to kill everyone and just move on his own, but this wasn't the only trial. He needed to gather as many people he could to move forward. "Shit, how many people have died already?" 30 people, I think. It was easy to see corpses were spread all around them. However, it was too difficult to differentiate who was possessed and who wasn't. Eventually, it became a situation where it was hard to tell how many spirits were remaining. "There are a shit ton of books. I just wish I could leave by choosing a random skill." While moving between the corpses, people looked through the bookshelves. Each book was a skill, and it looked like there were thousands of books currently arranged. While they were looking, with a thump, someone accidentally touched a corpse lying on the floor with their foot. At that moment, the corpse suddenly opened its eyes and grabbed the man's ankle. "What is?" Gah! The corpse he passed by, whom he thought was dead, chewed off his ankle. It then stood up, picked up a sword and slashed the man's body diagonally. Swoosh! Horus raised his sword and stormed in. In an instant, he reduced the distance between the spirit and himself and sliced off the possessed person's neck. However, without any time to be relieved, the man right beside him attacked. Was it two? No, it wasn't. From acting dead to moving between bodies. Right before he died, the shadow separated himself and moved to the person beside it. It happened in an instant. Blaze! However, blazing wings appeared out of Horus's back and burned the man. A smoky smell spread everywhere and the blazing wings hid their existence as if they didn't exist from the start. Shit! Horus cursed in his heart. He heard stories about spirit trials, but the one that he needed to complete seemed to be the worst one among them. He needed to quickly turn the lights on. There had to be a device somewhere to light up the place for a trial like this. Tick! It was at that moment. As if they were being turned on, the lights around them flickered as they became brighter. Horus frowned deeply. Just who? He was planning to start searching for it, but it seemed like someone had already found the switch. It was faster than he thought. It wasn't a bad thing, but for some reason, he felt uneasy about it. Creak! Thump! Thump! He could hear doors opening from here and there. However, Horus's expression didn't relax. Asterisk. Myung moved according to the direction the spirits moved in. The spirits were spread sparsely apart and it looked like they were connected in a single path. Not even the spirits could catch Myung when he moved in the dark. Myung was able to arrive at a location by following a simple rule. It's hidden in an easier spot than I thought. One bookshelf. Unlike the other bookshelves, the books on this bookshelf were disarranged. As he arranged the books on that bookshelf, the light came on in the sky library. Wow, it got brighter. Satisfied, Myung moved on. Suzy hurriedly followed him. Myung stopped for a moment and spoke. Are you planning on entering the next room? Can't I follow you? If you're going to pick a skill, you can stay here. That is. I don't want to be here alone. Suzy was the type that easily felt lonely. It was most likely because she was young, but she wasn't a bother in this current situation. Besides, Suzy's sense was quite useful. Finding this bookshelf was partly due to Suzy. Also, Myung thought that if Suzy could obtain a good skill, it could help Taewon to establish himself as a sovereign. Was it because he killed numerous heroes in the past? Myung wanted to see even a glimpse of a person who could be considered as a true hero work his way up from the bottom. Even if their paths were different from the path Myung tread. Don't bother me and just follow. I accept your orders. Suzy foolishly laughed and continued. In the past, my dad used to always say this to my mom. Don't speak useless words. Yes. Suzy weakly pouted her lips and Myung cold-heartedly turned his body. It was unfortunate, but Myung was an opponent who couldn't take jokes. Chapter 40, Azura, 4. TL, Mayani. Edited, Mayani, Yoni. Sponsored, Anonymous. The people who were satisfied with the low-ranked room decided to stay. Around 50 people. They were either people who were satisfied with the skill they obtained or thought, if the low-ranked room was like this, how much harder would the mid-ranked room be, and gave up. However, those who had joined a group couldn't give up now even if they wanted to. What group would have invested in a beginner for them to only learn a skill from the low-ranked room? Since they had already accepted so much, it was impossible to turn back now. As there was no group that would take a loss and accepted a useless person. They would obviously try to gain more than what they have invested. If they gave up, it would be hard to see anything good come out of it. Anyways, the only way the people who had already joined a group could relax was when they obtained the skill they needed from the Sky Library or died. Those were the words that appeared as soon as they entered the mid-ranked room. The difficulty has gone up. Myung nodded his head. There was no way that the difficulty would be the same as the low-ranked room, but steel dolls, was it? The original number of spirits had more than doubled and another variable was added in. However, his eyes focused on the condition that was announced about the dolls. It won't be easy. Both the shadow spirits and the steel dolls were very difficult to deal with. Especially the steel dolls, who were almost impossible for beginners with every stat less than 100 to defeat, were a distinct monster only the Sky Library possessed. It was hard against one type. However, two combined together. Of course, due to the characteristics of the shadow spirits, they were easier to deal with as a group, but since the steel dolls would indiscriminately attack their target, they were in a dilemma. To move alone or move together. It wouldn't be as easy to complete as the low-ranked room. Despite everything, it's fortunate that there aren't too many of them. There were only 5 steel dolls. It was essential to play tag. The most effective method was to eliminate the shadow spirits once the lights came on and then move alone. Everyone who could level-headedly look at the situation would have made the same conclusion. They might not have made it yet, but it was only a matter of time. It seems a bit cold. Susie blew hot air into her hands. The lights would come on and off every 3 seconds. Large bookcases stretched across the walls on either side and countless books were placed on the shelves. Although, the layout wasn't different from the low-ranked room, the only difference was the temperature. Though there was no wind, the temperature of the room itself was low. Humidity. Due to that, the humidity of the room rose. Even if the books were protected with preservation magic, there was no way this wasn't strange. Being dry was a basic practice of storing books. Myung immediately approached the bookshelf and stretched his hand to check the conditions of the books. It looks like humidity maintaining magic was cast as well. Unlike their surroundings, the books and bookshelves had no traces of water. Was he wrong? When he slowly examined the bookshelf, he found an especially dark-colored book. It's different. The book was wet. He took it out and checked the book cover. There was only a single circular symbol drawn on the cover. Keep it. Is it okay to take them out as we please? It's okay as long as you don't learn it. Mister, I will be a great porter. Susie energetically received the book Myung handed her. Unlike in the low-ranked room, she looked like she had adjusted slightly. It looks like I have to check other places as well. There probably wasn't only a single book like this. It was a small clue, however, if he was to find them, he would be able to complete the puzzle. Myung didn't become impatient and slowly moved away. What was the standard of being alone? How far of a distance did he have to keep to be considered alone? The steel dolls were big. A large build that stood 2.5 m tall. With a nose as long as Pinocchio's, they were human-shaped monsters. However, unlike their appearance, they were very agile. If there was more than one person, they would most certainly appear and only disappear after one was left. If you stood still because you were stricken with fear, then you would become food for the shadow spirits. They aren't retaliating. Myung kept far away from Susie and was progressively experimenting with the steel dolls. First, he believed that the standard for being alone was about 200 m. And if you attacked when you were alone, they would not retaliate. But their defense was very high. Even Myung's attacks weren't able to easily damage them. Anguish was a sword made to kill living creatures. It wasn't able to penetrate the non-living steel doll's outer layer. It's not to the point of being impossible. Myung was one as well as multiple. The Prince and the Avengers, the Blazing Spear Soldier and the Sorceress of Lightning. It was impossible by himself, but if many attacked at once, there was a chance to win with a significant reduction in losses. Tens of undead with overlapping buffs attacked one. The steel doll didn't have the ability to endure. The only problem was, were the profits greater than the losses? There is no reason for me to set myself up for losses. However, he shook his head. His decision was simple. He didn't see a big enough advantage. It was instead a waste of time. I have to quickly get to the high-ranked room. He only had 3 days. Every time he went up a room, the difficulty would sharply rise. Half a day had already passed. On top of that, the first person to enter the high-ranked room would get preferential treatment. A chance to obtain one more skill. Although it wasn't free, depending on one's effort, they would be given a chance to obtain another skill. There was no reason to waste time here. Myung waited for the steel dolls to leave before approaching Suzy. "Mr. A shadow's behind you." The moment Suzy called out looking behind Myung, he lowered his position and locked Suzy into his armpit. A shadow spirit had quickly followed him as soon as the steel doll had left. There was only one way to eliminate a shadow spirit. Only after letting it possess someone could he reduce their numbers. 2 shadow spirits were stubbornly following behind Myung. They aimed for Myung's feet from the opposite direction the steel doll left towards. He was soon able to discover a group. "Don't come near us. If you do, we will atta." They menacingly raised their weapons as soon as they saw Myung, but Myung looked like he didn't care as he passed by them. Soon after, the 2 shadow spirits chasing Myung changed their targets. "It's a shadow." "Gah!" He put the screams behind him and continued onwards. Another steel doll approached them from a different direction. It was difficult to separate themselves suddenly when they had already been registered as 2. Myung increased his speed. Then Suzy let out a sigh as if she had given up. "They said that you're not supposed to carelessly touch a lady." As soon as Horace entered, he immediately ran towards the top-ranked room entrance and checked the condition. Because of that, the number of people had been reduced by 10, but he didn't care. "I should have done this from the beginning." It was possible to check the necessary conditions to move to the next room this way. It seemed like if they progressed with the premise of sacrificing people, they were able to quickly and more easily enter the next room. "I guess I can easily get the first admission bonus." A bonus that would let someone obtain another skill. Any large guild would most likely know this information. It was the reason why the Sun Guild only allowed Horace to enter. It was a certain agreement to let everyone get the bonus without overlapping. Anyways, what are OS? Although he had confirmed the condition, he didn't know what the condition was referring to. Horace randomly looked around at his surroundings and soon found a book with an O on a bookshelf. "Look for wet books on the bookshelves." After Horace sent out an order, people started to move. The strongest person was Horace, and he even had the Sun Guild's support. However, each of their thoughts were different. To move to the high-ranked room, they needed 5 books. No one believed Horace would take care of everyone. On the contrary, didn't he sacrifice people? Although they decided that it would be safer than moving alone and they couldn't leave because they didn't want to step into the unknown, everyone was busy looking out for their own profit. If they found a book with an O, they would conceal it, and if they found the skill they wanted, they would secretly return to the low-ranked room. Horace greatly punished those people whenever he spotted them. "Bastards who hide the books after finding them will die. Bastards that run will die." He swung his sword. Roll. Without a moment of hesitation, a head flew off. Submission to power. People were scared. It was when they had gathered 4 books. "It's heavy. My shoulders hurt." "Endure it." Horace discovered a party of 2. A young girl and a man were running around together. The most surprising thing was that the young girl groaned while carrying what looked to be about 10 books. What the hell are those 2? Horace couldn't help but doubt his eyes. The steel dolls and shadow spirits were monsters that made even Horace nervous. There was no way that avoiding monsters while finding books would be an easy task. But they already had 10 books? And with only 2 people? They were probably lucky. It didn't make sense. Horace was always the best. Although he wasn't the number 1 candidate for the next guild master, his pure abilities were better than anyone else. A person like him leading a large number of people could only gather 4 books, so it was impossible for 2 people to have already gathered 10. Thud. Thud. As soon as people gathered, steel dolls appeared. Horus indicated two people near him. You. Go. Pardon. Grab the steel doll's attention. I don't want to. If you don't go, you will die by my hands. Swoosh. Horus raised his sword. Horus had not lied until now. He had already killed 5 people that actually refused his orders. Eventually, in front of the tyrant's acts of violence, the 2 chosen people grudgingly moved. However, there wasn't only a single steel doll. 4. Suddenly, 3 stood in their way. Just where? He could understand one, but the other 3 came from the same direction. They were moving together as if it was already pre-arranged. It was the first time 3 moved together. A desperately dangerous situation. It looks like those dolls followed us. But why are they attacking those people? A man and a girl briefly watched Horus without care and passed by as if nothing happened. Horus, who had heard the girl's words, couldn't help but distort his face. That bastard and bitch are the ones who dragged the steel dolls here. No wonder, it was weird for 3 of them to move together. Now that he looked at it, it seemed that they followed the 2 here. Then they spotted Horus's large group and prepared for combat. What do we do now? You guys think about that yourselves. Horus couldn't help but be nervous. The path was blocked and it seemed like the only way to live was to become the last one standing. Because if he was the only one remaining, the steel dolls would no longer attack. The only way was to endure until the rest had all died. It was pitiful, but it was the best decision he could make. I will definitely kill those 2. Horus ground his teeth as he gazed at the direction the man and the girl had disappeared to. The bonus was only given to one person. Myung completed the condition and was the first to step into the room. At the same time, another phrase appeared. Screech. Screech. They were only the size of a small child, but they were monsters that possessed sharp claws and wings. Thousands of harpies were roaming around in the air. The bookshelves were in disarray, so there were many places to hide, but it was impossible to hide for 24 hours. However, Myung revealed a small smile. It's a good chance to make flying undead. To Myung, danger was the same as a chance.